Kelly. Thank you for doing that.
Right. We are live and attendees are about to start popping in. Those numbers are going to start ticking up on my screen, which they are, and I am thrilled to be here. My name is Timothy. I am one of the booksellers at Wild Rumpus Books here in Minneapolis. I'm going to just sort of chatter for a second and let people get settled in and get their popcorn ready, have their beverages by their sides and ready to go. We do have a chat here tonight for everyone. There is going to be time for questions at the end of the event. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Now that I've started talking, Eartha is here to join. So, oh, nope, he's going to wander away again. We'll get him. We'll get him. So drop your questions in the chat. I'm also really curious where people are tuning in from. So I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop that in the chat as well. It's always exciting. It's one of the silver linings of doing virtual events is that we have people from all over, not only the state of Minnesota, but it looks like the country and even North America, which is fabulous. So thank you all for being here and taking time out of your night to be here. Cool. With that, I'm going to do a quick introduction and then turn it over to our wonderful guests tonight. Again, my name is Timothy. I'm the Events and Communications Coordinator as well as a bookseller here at Wild Rumpus Books in Linden Hills, Minneapolis. We are a bookstore for the young and young at heart. My colleague Jenna is in the chat. She's going to be dropping links to buy a copy of this wonderful, incredible, gorgeous hardcover book, The Troubled Girls of DRAGOMIR Academy, that we are here celebrating tonight. If you don't have your copy, grab that link from the chat. We also have a 15% off code that you can use on our website, so grab that as well. If you order your copy of The Troubled Girls of DRAGOMIR Academy before Thursday, Anne will personalize them. We will guarantee that. So as long as you order before Thursday, we will guarantee personalization. And all of those then will go out on Friday. After that, you're on your own. We will have signed copies while they last. So order as quickly as you can. We are recording this event. I want to thank Walden Pond Press, the publisher of this book, for permission to record the event, and also Anne and Kelly for being here and taking part in the event. Zoom events are super challenging and everyone is sort of over it, including us events managers who have been doing it. But we at Wild Rumpus are trying to be mindful of all of our young customers who are not eligible just yet to get vaccinated for COVID, although I'm hearing good news that some of our young kids are going to be vaccinated soon. So with that, one of the bright sides of doing virtual events is that we can have people from all over the country and all over the world. And I want to mention an event we're doing for this beautiful picture book that's coming out next month. It's called In the Meadow of Fantasies. We are doing an event with the illustrator who lives in Iran, which is amazing that we get to do this kind of thing. Nushin Safako is the illustrator. We will also have Sarah Khalili, the illustrator, joining us from New York. That is on November 6th at 11 a.m. U.S. Central Time. So if you're interested, we will have links to that in the chat as well. Super excited about that one. For tonight's event, like I said, there will be time for questions at the end. So feel free to drop those in the chat at any time or use the Q&A function as well. I'll be monitoring that and we will get to as many of them as we can. Without further ado, I'm going to read quick bios for our two guests tonight. Anne Ursu is the author of acclaimed novels, The Lost Girls, Breadcrumbs, The Real Boy, and The Real Boy, which was long listed for the National Book Award. The recipient of McKnight Fellowship in Children's Literature, Anne is also a member of the faculty at Hamline University's MFA in Writing for Children and Young Adults. She lives in Minneapolis, not too far from our wonderful bookstore, with her family and her ever-growing family of cats, which includes cat cousins in Eartha and Booker here at the store. Kelly Barnhill lives in Minnesota with her husband and 3 children. She's the author of 4 novels, most recently, The Girl Who Drank the Moon. winner of the 2017 John Newbery Medal. She is also the winner of the World Fantasy Award and has been a finalist for the Minnesota Book Award, a Nebula Award, and the Penn USA Literary Prize. We are so thrilled to have both of these incredible, kind, smart authors here with us tonight to talk about this incredible book, The Troubled Girls of Dragomir Academy. With that, I'm going to shut up. Thanks everyone for being here.
We're so delighted. So thank you everyone so much for coming. This is an incredible turnout, and we see so many names of people we just love and adore, and both of us are absolutely thrilled. Thank you. And yes, this is a bat shirt. I had a question whether or not to wear the black cat shirt or the bat shirt before this event. I opted for bats given that the seasonal appropriateness, and it does glow in the dark. I'm hopeful that nothing will happen where we actually have to see that.
We could though. We could all sit in the dark, yeah, and you could glow, and that would be like weirdly appropriate. I feel like you made the correct dress choice, actually.
Thank you, Kelly. That means a lot. I really appreciate that.
Shine on you a little bit. Well, I think you should read to us.
Okay.
And then I'll ask you some possibly impertinent questions. What do you think?
That sounds really wonderful. I will read, and I thought I might read from this.
Good idea.
This is The Troubled Girls of Dragomir Academy, and I'm just going to read from the first chapter. And I have to show this because it's so pretty. The designer, David DeWitt, did an amazing job, and the illustrator, James Fernhaber, I believe I have that right. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just this gorgeous cover and this gorgeous design. Chapter 1, The Girl in the Coop. There were few women pictured in the great tapestries of Illyria, besides the witches, of course. The tapestries depicted moments of heroism, epic battles of good and evil, of powerful sorcerers and brave noblemen protecting the kingdom from the monsters that had threatened it throughout its history. That is not to say that girls and women did not matter to Illyria. Behind every great tapestry was a woman who wove it, just as behind every great sorcerer was a wife to tend to his domestic affairs, a governess to teach his children, a cook to warm his gullet, a maid to keep his fires lit. And behind every boy who dreamed of being a sorcerer was a mother who raised him to be brave, noble, and kind. And perhaps that boy even had a sister who, right before the Council for the Magical Protection of Illyria finally visited his humble home to test him for a magical gift, made sure the chicken coop was spotless. If some master weaver were to immortalize the scene at the Lupu house on the day this story begins, the day before the council would come to find if Luca Lupu was indeed a sorcerer, maybe somewhere on the edges of the tapestry, you would find an image of Maria Lupu doing just that, while her father and her brother sat at the dining room table, reciting the names of the Illyrian kings and the years of their reigns, and her mother scanned the family library, making sure it demonstrated that theirs was a household of superior quality, with books full of the best information and void of any dubious predilections or philosophies. The Lupus had been waiting for this day since Luca had come into the world 13 years earlier, bright-eyed and somehow already sage-looking, as if he had absorbed enough wisdom in utero to declaim on some of the weightier issues facing a baby, if only he could speak. What was it about Luca that made him such an obvious sorcerer? Was it his good looks, his quick wit, his strength, his comportment, his ready smile? If you asked his parents, it was all of those things, plus something else, something you couldn't put into words. So naturally, they talked about it all the time. If you asked his sister, though, well, you would learn quickly not to ask his sister. Anyway, people never seemed to care what Maria thought about such matters. For instance, Maria thought that scrubbing out the chicken coop a second time this week was ridiculous. The council would be here to evaluate her brother, not the chicken coop. They would not look in the chicken coop, and even if for some reason they did look in the chicken coop and find it not to their naturally exalted chicken coop standards, it would hardly affect their evaluation of Luca. They were not going to say, gracious, what a powerful sorcerer that boy will be. Too bad about the chicken coop, though. Nonetheless, there she was, scrubbing out the chicken coop. It was hot, and the coop was even more foul than usual. Maria's apron was filthy. There was something sticky woven into her long brown braids, and feathers had taken up residence in her mouth. Her nostrils tickled. A fly buzzed around her head in a manner that seemed deliberate. But at this moment, Maria wasn't worried about stickiness, nostril tickling, or deliberate flies, because yesterday she had put honey in Luca's undergarments, and today she could expect retribution. Why had she put honey in his underthings? 2 reasons. First, her older brother had spent his entire life being told by everyone that he had a great destiny. Someone had to put honey in his underwear. Second, he had started it. When Maria was 9, Luca had filled her boots with dung. She had responded by making him oatmeal with sour goat milk, causing him to spend the entire night locked in the bathroom. Any normal person would have considered it done then, but Luca had felt he had to get revenge on her, and so she'd have to pay him back again, and on and on and on it had gone. And so this morning, when he appeared behind her as she was scrubbing some unspecified goo up the front of the coop, she jumped up and stood an arm's length away from him, just in case. Aren't you supposed to be studying? She asked. I told Papa I needed some fresh air for a moment, he said, to help me take in everything we're studying. She should have known. Their father was a tutor and a great believer in the educational benefits of fresh air. There's fresh air over there, she said, pointing off in the distance, on the other side of the river. Ignoring her, he nodded toward the coop. That doesn't look very clean. Maybe you should use your magic, she said, crossing her arms. His eyes darkened. That's not funny. It was funny, at least to Maria. Luca had shown no sign of being able to do magic yet, and while this was to be expected, magic didn't usually manifest in boys born with the gift until they were 14 or 15. She could tell he was anxious about it. Just try, she said, before the council comes. Maybe it will work. That way, when they admire how clean the coop is, you can tell them you did it with magic. I don't have to prove myself to you, but you have to prove yourself to the council. What if they ask you to do something and you can't? That's not how it works, Luca said. You don't know that. I do know. The council tests you before your magic comes in, so an experienced sorcerer can mentor you throughout the process. They don't need to see magic, they can just tell. Maria pressed her lips together. She couldn't argue. After all, everything always worked out exactly the way Luca wanted, which was a kind of magic, really. Anyway, he said, straightening, you better be nice to me for once. When they give me my own estate, I can just leave you here. I can order you to an asylum or banish you to Mountainland to be bait for the giants. That's all you care about, isn't it? Maria spat back. You just want to be rich and important. You want servants to boss around and do the work while you lie around wondering if your slippers are comfortable enough. Luca drew up as if this were the most offensive thing he'd ever heard. That's not what it's about. Being a sorcerer is a heavy responsibility. They need places to live and people to manage their affairs. He sighed portentously. I can't be worried about the household when I'm supposed to be protecting the kingdom from the dread. The household, like it was already his, like he was already in his office at the center of some grand estate, giving orders, eating plums, letting someone else clean up the pits. It had not always been like this between them. There had been a time when Maria and Luca shared a room, and at night they'd lie in bed and whisper scary stories about giants and witches and dread, and then neither of them could sleep. There was a time when they'd played sorcerers in the backyard, waving their hands in the air and pretending to enchant the chickens. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much. Hi, Penny.
Oh yeah, Penny's on the floor. She's disemboweling a dragon right now.
That's only appropriate, yeah.
Right. It's how we do in the Barnhill house. So that was wonderful. And one of the things that really strikes me in reading this book was just, I love Maria so much, and I love that she holds her wounds right here. right? She starts out as such a deeply wounded person, and she doesn't even understand why, right? Like it's literally floating in front of her. And so the only possible response as a reader is just instant compassion, right? And one of the things that I just always have admired about you as a writer is just the sense of compassion that you bring to your work, and that you invite the reader into that same place of compassion. So let's talk a little bit about Maria as a character. So how did your relationship with her begin?
It's such a good question. I tend to one of the things that we talk about as writers is how does the book start? Is it a plot? Is it a world? Is it a person? And all of my books really have started with, I'm a fantasy writer, so they start with sort of the concept, the magic. And this was magical kingdom, men have magic, troubled girls' school, and so I had to think about, so who's the girl that's best going to live this story, right? What qualities do I want to bring out? And as I started thinking about it, one of this book deals a lot with sort of with gaslighting, with what happens when you tell girls that they are troubled or small or only have certain things they can do in society. So it seemed really important that she had a strong relationship with shame. Yay, read my book. So it is, my agent has informed me that I tend to pitch my books in the most depressing way possible. Yay!
So I talk about grief.
yes, exactly. It's a searing exploration of grief. This one is a searing exploration of shame. So I needed to put her sort of in that family situation, in something we're very particular, that kind of was emblematic of the broader society, which is that really boys matter because boys might be sorcerers, and we need sorcerers to protect the kingdom because there's a monster, which is the dread. This is a smoke thing. And otherwise we're all doomed. And I wanted her parents to be kind of strivers, thinking that because they were so blessed to have a son who's probably going to be a sorcerer, they should certainly act like it because they are certainly better than everyone else. And then Maria, not performing femininity in the right way, is doing it wrong and should be probably either shunted to the side or just constantly corrected. So it sort of came from that. I also, though, I needed her to have a little bit of some kind of spark that could be inflamed later, that there needed to be some seed of self-confidence there, or of a belief in a better world, or that she didn't have to lose herself to shame. And so that very quickly meant I needed to give someone who believed in her. And so that she develops a relationship with the family next door, who are like, oh, okay, your parents are awful, we're gonna be nice to you. So that the character of Madame Bondu, who's named after my dad's cousins, Johnny and Lucille Bondu, sort of takes Maria under her wing and mentors her and gives her, I think, some vocabulary for maybe understanding what's happening to her. And that is one of the things that helps her through the book.
She also gives her things to be good at, right?
Yeah.
And which isn't to say that there aren't things that she's good at home. There are. I mean, obviously she was in charge of, taking care of her baby brother before that tragedy. But also she knows that she is the only person who can care for Anton the goat, who is my favorite, by the way.
Just give me a moment. I have to adjust the lighting scheme. 1 second here. Like in Clueless. Okay, much better.
Yeah, so we can see your face better now. It's so cute. You're so beautiful. Look at you. Oh, my heavens to Betsy. Maybe we should just only talk about how pretty you are for the rest of the time. Just kidding. We'll keep going.
Let's talk about the goat.
Anyway, Anton the goat. I love him so much, but I also, one of the things that I think is so remarkable about the Madame Bandu character is that she gives us an adult who is, you know, benevolent and kind, but who also doesn't have all the information too, right? And is also sometimes wrong about things, you know, and allowing the adults to be, oh, hang on a second. No. Guys, I really apologize. I'm sending the dog away. 1 second.
Penny is spending all day in obedience school right now, and so she's got a lot going on, and we're all gonna
Apologize.
lots of love.
I really apologize. My dog is very naughty. So anyway, the because it's one thing to sort of like have adults that are basically placeholders, right? Like here's the evil one and here's the excellent one and whatever. And that's not really what's happening here. Like even mom and dad who suck. I mean, let's just say that, like they really suck. They suck so bad. They are not the correct parents for this moment. But they and they're not giving her what she needs. They're not giving her brother what he needs either. But they too, you give us some insight into them as well, that they are they're also like feel like they're on a knife's edge, you know, that for them their social strata, their higher social strata is in reach for them, and they feel desperate. And like you can really feel their desperation, particularly in how they deal with Maria. I felt so.
I don't know what your drafts are like, but one of the things that it tends to happen in mine is my first draft is like, here's my sledgehammer, you know. When my friend Laura Ruby read it, she was talking about, well, so, you know, with abusive parents, you need to think this. I'm like, oh, no, they're not. No. Oh, I should probably adjust those dials down a little bit. Like I hadn't intended for that to happen. They were just supposed to be that the dad is indifferent and the mom is pretty critical, but I wanted it to be clear, and as Madame Bandu actually explains to Maria, that you know, there's only so many options for Maria, for a girl in this world, and you have to behave a certain way since she doesn't have money, she doesn't have a title, she doesn't have anything, so she's going to need to act a certain way in order to be able to make it in the world. Right. And they're also desperately afraid that if Luca isn't a sorcerer, what's going to happen to the family, what's going to happen to them. So I wanted to make that more complex and more interesting, and I'm glad that came through.
Right, and it isn't that it doesn't make the ramifications of their choices any better, right? Like it still is terrible. It still has harmed their children, right? And both of their children in ways that are surprising and subtle, that I thought was very cool. I want to ask you some questions about the research you did in folk music.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So I don't know if you know this about me, but I was a folk music kid when I was growing up. Like I would research like and from a totally different region than what you were doing, primarily from like Scotland and parts of England and Ireland. I researched all these songs, and most of them had a very similar theme, which was the Lord came riding by and things didn't go well for the maiden, right? Well, it's like many versions of that song, but you are doing something interesting here with folk songs. So can you talk a little bit about, first of all, the folk music that you did some research on, but also this way in which folk music becomes this other form of community storytelling?
I just want to say very quickly that I believe where Kelly was doing this research was at the same library I went to as a kid. And we discovered as adults, we were running around the Walker Library at the exact same time. My mom was working on her dissertation, and so she would sit in a carrel and then just let me wander around the children's section. And Kelly was wandering around with all her brothers and sisters there. And we didn't know each other and weren't friends, but yet I feel our hearts met.
Yeah, it's true. We were raised by the same librarians.
Yes,
so.
yes. And the same tattered Edward Eager books and the same shelves. And also the library was in a basement. There's no good air in it. So that's why we're so pale.
Right. It was
anyway,
I think that's why I have asthma.
So, one of the things that came about as I was researching this book is set in kind of a fantasy version of Romania. That is my heritage on my dad's side. It was a way for me to sort of tap into my Eastern European roots, and discovered really the incredible importance of folk traditions. The other thing that's happening is I'm trying to write a mystery, which it turns out is really hard. And one of the things you need in mysteries, it turns out, is clues. So every draft, it was like, oh, I need another thing because I need another clue. I need another clue. I need another clue. And the last one, I was like, no, I need one more thing. My editor's like, please don't add any more elements. And I'm like, oh, it's just going to be a tiny one. And then I added the folk music because I needed to embed one more clue. And so I did a lot of reading in Eastern Europe. It's actually more like the Lord is going to come by and then the maiden is going to be a witch and eat his head. So it's a different kind. Different kind of.
That was when I was a kid.
Come to be with my people. So there's this sense of, I mean, obviously it's the songs are like, so many of them are just the saddest things in the entire world. It's just dripping with tragedy because it's a land that was just constantly conquered by, on one side or the other. People are just crossing back and forth, conquering it. But also, it had this wonderful magical tradition, especially, in the around Transylvania. That just had these wonderful folk tales about witches and monsters, and so those got into the folk songs as well. So it was really fun to try to take that sense of both magic and tragedy and try to write these songs for myself.
Mm-hmm. I loved them.
Good. Thank you
very much.
I recommend just spending a day reading like Eastern European folk songs if you want to read things about witches eating men.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I feel like there's a whole musical avenue that I need to start exploring. That sounds really good. I'm thinking about taking up voice lessons again. So
oh, cool.
I'll start singing Romanian folk songs. That'd be really fun.
For it.
I have another question for you, and I want you to talk a little bit about tapestries. Especially, did you do any specific research into sort of the history of tapestrying? Because it certainly feels like you did.
So I was actually looking over my notes for how this book began, and literally I had started with the phrase the headmaster's monster, and there were 10 different options for what those were. But then I have a page of Sabine was her name then, before this was Eastern European. Her family are weavers. And then I wrote, no, the neighbors are weavers. I have no idea how that happened. But from that came the idea that this is a world in which tapestries are sort of record history. And there are women all over the country who are known as master weavers, and they can be hired by the gentry to portray great moments in their lives. But they are also they write the history books. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of one of those happy accidents. But I did then suddenly you come up with that idea and you're like, oh, let's have to figure out how this works, right? So you're watching YouTube videos and there's this place in France where they're trying to preserve the art of tapestry making. And so I watched this really cool special on how they did it. And, now I know about that, which is the great thing about writing, right? But that, and that, in the first draft, it was just like, okay, Madame Bondry, so she's a weaver and they record history and that's cool. Yay, so I'm gonna write the rest of the book. Again, first draft, Laura Ruby was like, I want more tapestries, Anne. I want more tapestries. And we do this all the time. We just throw stuff on the page and then completely ignore it. And then our readers are like, remember that thing you did? You did that for a reason. And I know it and you know it, and now I'm making you do it. So that sort of led to this thread of embroidery and folk arts. And I ran across this reference to the Romanian embroidery language, and which was this language of symbols that women in villages put into all of their weaving, into the blouses and into the aprons. And it was a language, and women were writing their stories into these beautiful pieces of embroidery. And at first I'm like, that's cool. And I remember telling my editor about that. I'm like, this is so cool. And he's like, great, I can't wait to see what you're going to do with it. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Editors are always making us do stuff. It's rude, actually.
It's so rude. More tapestries. Do stuff with the cool thing you found that is weirdly linked to the tapestry. So anyway, it turns out later that I did find something to do with it, which was that you could, interestingly, if you're writing a mystery in which women's voices are somewhat suppressed, but yet the stories they tell are really important to solving that mystery, so you could hypothetically encode some symbols into various pieces of weaving.
Yeah.
Who knew? It might have been that it actually all was there in the beginning, and yet I was not remotely smart enough to see it, and was in fact actively hostile to the suggestions.
You know what? I feel like that we really should reserve the right to be hostile.
Thank you.
All the time, like it's a lot of freaking work. But also, I mean, I think that's. I mean, I don't know if this is true for you, but for me, I mean, the process is just so mysterious, right? I think that there is so much that our subconscious does because I used to think that it was sort of the Michelangelo sort of like approach to writing, that you're just chipping away everything that's not, the David, and like eventually you'll find it, it's just in there somewhere. But I don't think that that's it. I think it is actually much more like weaving. I think it is more like a tapestry, that that sometimes you just don't know where the thread is connected to, and sometimes you actually do need somebody to be like, no, it's over here. That thing, you've already done it. You've already sewn it. You just have to put the edges around it and like actually see it. Yeah. And because I think that we just are often, it's the, Julian of Norwich, the cloud of unknowing, that we sort of have to like ascend past the cloud in order to, really understand what it is that we're doing. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, every book I've written, it's like, and it's just so annoying. God, it's so annoying. It's like the answers were there. And even in the ones that have been totally like knocked down and rebuilt, like the seeds and everything I needed was in the draft somewhere. And often it took someone smarter than me to point it out, but what to build. But like you go back and you look, and when you're done revising, and you're like, well, that wow. That wish I'd figured that out in the beginning, but you kind of can't. Like it's the novels are, and we both teach, and one of the things that, I'm trying to say is novels are so big. It's so big, like a tapestry, it's so big. You cannot possibly hold it all in your head at once. And it's going to take many, many, many drafts to figure out. And what you got to do is you got to get stuff down and then go sit back and look at what you made. And if also perhaps ask some other people to help you so they can be like, look at that thing you did. Wouldn't that be interesting if you did more of it? And then you can be hostile about it.
Yeah. No, I'm all for being hostile. Speaking of being hostile,
yes.
Let's talk a little bit about anger.
Okay.
One of the things that I really, really like about this book is that it gives girls a space to be really, really dang angry, and that anger is okay. And so I think, in some ways, I what I like about this is that it's a little bit like it has a little bit of a resource in which kids can build a language to understand what the patriarchy is, which is helpful. I think that that's a helpful tool, a helpful sort of set of words to be able to sort of like, because sometimes you can't see a thing until you know the name for it, right? It's like I never knew what mayflies were, and then suddenly I learned the word mayfly, and then the mayflies were everywhere, right? And I think that that is true with sort of the language of patriarchy and the language of separation and subjugation, and that subjugation requires separation, right? And also that patriarchy sucks for everybody, for both the boys and the girls, right? And so let's talk about that a little bit. And was there anything in the news that was like, think about this, Anne?
Kelly, it's funny you should ask that. So I had been working on something else, and then there was a Supreme Court vacancy, and there's some people named, and then this very angry man with hair. And it turned out that some things had happened in his past, and it suddenly the women who were speaking up were being demonized, and he himself was being sort of believed and celebrated and allowed to rant about beer and squee and squee. What was his name?
Oh, freaking squee.
So the Brett Kavanaugh hearings happened, and I remember like one night at home, and I just ordered artichoke dip from Pizza Luce, and I just ate the entire thing of it, just sitting there in front of my TV, like rage eating. And I have lactose issues, so that was like serious. But and I spent, and after that, I couldn't write without finding some way to deal with my feelings about that, and about saying something to kids about what happened there, about what it represents, about the structures that showed. And I couldn't write anything else until I found that. So when I heard in a commercial, maybe the phrase "the headmaster's monster," that's where this book kind of laid itself out. As soon as the phrase monster comes in, then you and I are both like, oh, now there's a story. I get it. But part of that, I think part of writing that and part of engaging with the way that the patriarchy exerts control is writing about anger and about the right to be angry. Maria, it's told basically told like in that scene after I stopped, like, your body looks angry, Maria, by her mother, like you're not supposed to.
Oh man, that I had to put the book down for a second. Like I was just like, there was so much. It pulled up so much from my own childhood of like the policing of our bodies. Like there's something about your face that's wrong right now, right? There's something about your voice that's wrong right now. There's something about the way you're standing that's wrong right now. It was so completely spot on, and her powerlessness against it was awesome, Anne. That was just freaking awesome. Good job.
Thank you. So one of the things
Sorry to interrupt.
no, the school, so Dragomir Academy, the School for Troubled Girls, is trying to take these girls who don't necessarily fit in with Illyrian society and turn them into people who can work on sorcerers' estates, which means they have to turn them essentially into ladies. And yes, I'm getting a lot of my inspiration here from a lifelong inhaling of Jane Austen novels. But in terms of, so you have to have the right etiquette, and you have to speak correctly. And what all of that does is a matter of trying to sort of reshape the girls into something that really makes them very small and really regulates their behavior. And it's only until that, some of the lies behind the school are revealed that the girls realize that they actually have permission to be angry. One of the things that I sort of needed to do in designing the cast of characters for this book was have a girl who came in angry, and this is the character. Her name is Alana. When I was looking through Romanian names, sorting through like, okay, who am I going to name what? I'm like, oh yeah, that one's Alana, after Alana K. Arnold. But she comes from a very privileged position, and so she felt like, so she had a little bit of anger in her, and that allowed Maria to borrow it later. And I think that's one of the things that happens when girls are together, is you teach each other. You can model different behaviors, you can try different things out. And if Maria's responding with shame, oh, you could also respond with anger. That's a different way. And
never told her before.
No
right?
one
right. told her. Mm-hmm.
So, and this is why also in the book, they do in Dragomir Academy, they do a lot of things to keep the girls sort of separated, as you say, and competitive with each other. And that is really essentially to keep them from getting angry, from talking, from sharing experiences, and from getting strength with each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and it was awesome. It was an awesome read. I enjoyed every page of it. I really did. I just think it's just a wonderful achievement. I'm really, I just am going to gush at you because you have no option to leave right now. So I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful book. And I am excited for everybody here to read it. I'm excited for everybody here to buy several copies of it and give it to girls that they know and boys that they know and everybody that they know, because they should all read this book. I think that it is 6:43, so we should probably open it up to questions, because I think given the robust nature of this chat, that perhaps there are some questions. What do you think? If not, I have more things to talk to Anne about if we run out.
If on some chance we run out of questions, yes, but I would love to talk if people have questions for me or for Ms. Barnhill here. Hi, Timothy.
Hi, thanks for letting me back into this incredible conversation. I'm getting a text from all of my coworkers about how great this is. So the first question is sort of a softball, but because we have two of Minnesota's best writers, we had a question in the chat about why Minnesota is such an incubator of brilliance. But I do think that there is something to that. Why does Minnesota produce so many incredible writers?
Well, obviously the vibrant independent bookstores.
Yes, well, there's that.
I mean, it's, this is, Kelly and I talk about being raised by the same librarians. There's a wonderful culture here of reading. Minnesota has, in Minneapolis, St. Paul has taken care of its artists. And so, with the bookstores, with the libraries, with the loft, it is reading and writing is something that is promoted and celebrated, and that has its effect on what people do. I mean, I don't think well, this is the only thing I know how to do or are good at. I don't know, if I could have done it in a community that doesn't completely support and celebrate its writers. What do you think, Kelly?
Well, I think that is true. I mean, you can't throw a stick in a coffee shop without hitting a children's author. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
but don't, because it hurts.
right. We shouldn't throw sticks. But I think, I mean, yeah, I mean, it has a lot to do with sport. There is this this long history in Minnesota of philanthropic support for the arts, and that you can make a living here. I mean, that's like, it's cheap to live here, and or cheaper, and you know, I worked for Compass, and you know, taught creative writing classes around the state of Minnesota, and it was a way that I could be a writer and also, you know, pay my mortgage. We both are recipients of the McKnight grant. There's for an artist, money is oxygen, right? I can like get your cavity filled and make sure you can, you know, put your kids in daycare and, you know, whatever. All of that actually really, it sounds so mundane, but it actually makes a huge difference, I think. But also, we have a lot of bookstores here, and people read and they talk about books, and that matters too in its own way. And we have this amazing library system that has always been, I mean, it's been a treasure to me since I was a little kid, and remains a treasure to me now. It's been the hardest thing, I think, for during the pandemic. I have not gone to the downtown library and sat and worked in one of the workrooms, which is like where I've written several books. So all of that, I think, makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And in terms of children's writers, I do think we really do have to say, with the presence of Wild Rumpus and Red Balloon, in that we have these two amazing children's bookstores that support our books and promote them and give us a foundation for being writers in the world. It makes a huge difference, and I think they're so responsible for the fact that this is such a vibrant community.
Yeah, no, for sure. Also, I mean, winter. I mean, let's face it, we're all really shy people, and you know, winter, you know, is this sort of like, we all kind of hibernate, and I mean, a lot of I don't get very much done at all during the summer, you know. It's all of my work happens when there's snow. I'm kind of waiting for the snow so I can like start this. Don't tell my editor, so I can start the book that I was supposed to already turn in. Shh.
No, this is recorded, right? I want to say, Rita also mentions in the chat
that part.
the support for the from Minnesota teachers and school librarians as well, and which gets back again to this culture of reading that is cultivated by everybody, and by teachers and librarians that care about the books and care about the kids. So it's a huge, vast network, and we are quite blessed.
Call it a tapestry, Anne?
You know, maybe I shall call it a tapestry. Thank you, Kelly. Why, yes.
Thank you for the shout out. I thank you for giving us something to get excited about as booksellers. I mean, there's no bookstore without writers who are writing incredible books that we get to sell. So thank you, Pat. One of the other questions in the chat, Anne, is how did you manage the frustration of writing draft after draft of this book? I mean, there is so much anger to it.
But I complain a lot. I eat a lot of cheese. I text Swathi a lot and yell about things. You know, it is frustrating because you have this idea in your head of how the book's going to look, and then you write a draft, and it's like, well, that was nothing. And then your friends and your editor read it, and they're all like, yeah, good job. So we're going to do this again. And it's not fun. It's a lot of work. But what helps, I think, is having done this before. You sort of at least build up resilience for and faith in the process that the revision is going to work. And I am very blessed to have the readers in my life that I do that are going to help me get it to the book that it wants to be. It's hard, and again, trying to figure out, make this plot work and figure out all the clues and figure out, you know, keep Maria's character going, and just ended up being so complicated. But it just, at least having faith in my support system, as well as knowing that there is an end to this. And it's worked before, so maybe it'll work again, was very helpful.
Mhm. It is an act of faith, right?
Yeah.
I think I have more drawer novels than you. So I don't have faith that it'll work because it has not worked so very many times. But yeah, it is one of those things that, like, if you didn't like doing it, it would be way worse. You know what I mean? And it is true that sometimes we don't really like doing it at all. Like sometimes, like, writing is terrible and nobody should have this job. And I wouldn't have it if I had another skill. But I do think that that even when we're sort of writing this, like, I mean, there's a lot of pain in this book. Like there's a lot of pain. Shame hurts,
Yeah.
right? And so I can't imagine what it must have been like for you to sort of return to that space again and again. But I think that what keeps us moving is also just this deep love that we have for our characters. And that's one of the things that is super evident in this book for me, was just that, oh, Anne really, really loves this character, right?
And then, one of the things that we get asked sometimes is, do you write for yourself or do you write for the audience? And I've never been able to answer that. And I finally realized that, I'm writing for the character. Like,
Yeah.
You're putting someone in this first chapter who needs something and has these wounds, and like, you're like, oh baby, let me help you, and you can't just fix it for them. You have to, like, get them to a place. And so it was very important to me for poor Maria to get her to a place where she was okay. And that took a lot. Like, there were monsters, and there was a lot of stuff that had to happen to get her to that place. But that at least is some way of getting through.
And the monsters are terrifying. It's a really scary, like, the dread is really scary. It was a little bit too scary for me. I had to have Ted hold the book for a little bit. I was like,
I scared Kelly, yay.
First of all, I want to say to everyone, if we don't get to your question, I'm so sorry. We do have a limited amount of time, and there are so many people here, which is thrilling for all of us. But I do apologize if we can't get to everything. With that in mind, there's a really meaty question from the chat, which is that there is a big conversation about tropes and appropriation to be had in fantasy writing. So you mentioned leaning on your family heritage for this book. And the question is, can you speak a little bit more about how that informed and enriched your story? And how you avoided some of the mistakes that other fantasy writers have made when it comes to using those kinds of real world cultural inspirations in their fantasy books.
I think that's a really good question. And I hope I avoided them. I wanted, part of it is thinking about, okay, well, this is Torak, the village that Maria is from. That's where my grandpa was from. A very really small village in what is now Serbia, but was in Romania. And trying to think about those people in my that were from in my family that were from these really small villages, and trying to honor them in a way. I also very much wanted this to be that as much as, like, this is inspired by and there are aspects of this that are very much inspired by Romania, I'm not trying to profit off of that. This is also a separate world. There are elements of it. There's the tapestry weaving itself isn't particularly Romanian. But I guess my hope was to just try to lean into it with as much sort of respect and love for the people as I possibly could, and try to think very carefully about, is this gonna hurt anyone? I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's my answer is pretty much all about this and anything, is try to be thoughtful, respect, and compassion.
First, do no harm.
Right, that's our job, right? Like, this is, if I'm gonna lean into something, let me lean into, I can lean into the Romanians, or on my mom's side, I can lean into the Mennonites, you know, I have those people in my world, but and in my family, but I don't want to hurt anybody. That's the last thing. It's our fundamental job as children's writers to help kids be in the world and not create any harm. So it's something I take very seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, that is a really big question, and we could do a whole conversation about that kind of thing.
Yeah, a whole panel.
Many people do, but I'm glad that question got asked. So this is, I think, my favorite question in the chat so far, which is, what do we have to do to get an Anton short story?
Ooh.
So Anton is the goat who Luca gets his test and something had to go wrong, and Maria had to be sort of responsible. So I wrote up to that point in the book, and I'm like, well, what's going to happen now? And clearly the answer became there needed to be a goat, obviously, like goat related mayhem. So then I had to go back and seed the goat, which is why he's named Anton, because if there's going to be goat related mayhem in the 4th chapter, you need to have the goat in the 1st chapter, right? It's Chekhov's law. Anyway. I know but I feel that Anton has really had his day, and he's happy now. Anton's okay, and that's what's most important in this story. But thank you for loving him, and he's very grateful. He feels seen, and Mario was the only person who saw him for a while, so he appreciates that very much.
If I was to write fan fiction about it would be a total Anton story. Like Anton gets out of the Lupu farm and goes on a grand adventure in search of Mario. Like, if I was a fan fiction person, that's what I would write.
I would probably die if Kelly wrote goat related fan fiction for this book or any other.
Really goat exclusive fan fiction is what I would do if I was a fan fiction person, which I don't have I don't have the attention to sort of I would never be able to do it. People do it. I think it's awesome. But that my brain doesn't work that way. But if I did, it would be all goat related. So anyway.
Thank you, Kelly.
So I just want to say for the audience that if anyone does write any goat related fan fiction, my email here at Wild Rumpus is tim@wild.com. I would love it if you would send it to me. I may have to start a publishing company just for Anne Ursu, Kelly Barnhill fan fiction.
And we can hand them our standard rich and famous contract. I think the goat fan fiction is the way to money, and I'm here for it.
Well, me too. I agree. I think you know what, this idea is gold. Honestly, let's do it.
Just giving them away here. Giving them away. Let's see. I think we have time for one more question, and I think let's kind of look toward the future. So this question is for both of you, which is how, and I think there's some sarcasm to one of the words in this question, but how are you two managing creative output during the last couple of marvelous years?
I think some people have 2 books coming out next year.
3.
Some people have 3 books coming out next year.
I mean, maybe 3. We'll see. That I'm not totally sure about the 3rd, but I believe it's coming out in September. I know it's weird.
2, 3, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, how have you managed things, Anne? Just generally.
So yeah, I would describe my management skills here as bad. When the pandemic really hit here, when school was canceled, I had just handed in the first draft of Dragomir, and then it's like, okay, well, this is good because now, you know, we are like looking for paper towels all the time and masks and just sanitizing, like just have to constantly sanitize for 22 to 24 hours a day. You know, and I didn't do anything over the summer. I played Sid Martin's Civilization, and then I got my draft back and like, okay, well now I have to figure out how to work again. Having deadlines helped, but you know, it was oh, and then I got to do my copy edits were due on January 6th. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm going to turn them in at 5 p.m. January 6th. And I keep getting these texts like, Anne, are you watching TV? Are you watching TV? And I'm like, I'm not watching anything. I'm doing copy edits. And people are like, Anne. So anyway, there was a lot happening. My copy edits were late. No one seemed to care. So it's with the only thing that really helped me were structure and deadlines. And now I'm at a point where I want to write something else. And I'm trying to, I've got 3 chapters of something. And what's motivating me right now is I'm trying to write a ghost story that also grapples with chronic illness. And I'm thinking about all of the kids who are getting long COVID and what I might be able to say to them. And so that at least is giving me something to deal with all of these marvelous pandemic feels. But whether, you know, it is hard. And my general advice is to be gentle with yourself. It's a freaking pandemic. Like, we're all doing the best we can. When I first moved to Minneapolis with my then 3-year-old son, my standard was, are we all alive at the end of the day? And if so, this is success. And we have been successful every dang day. And I think the fact, you know, that anything anyone has done, whether that has been getting out of bed on most days or writing something, or getting out of bed on only some days, is still a success. We're all here, and I just strongly urge everyone to be gentle.
Yeah, boy. Yeah, it's weird. I hadn't really thought about it until just, you know, as I was like doing copy edits for the new book. But so my new book is called The Ogress and the Orphans, and it comes out in March. And so over there, I'm like looking at it as if it's like gonna eat me or something.
Not gonna eat you.
It might. But yeah, you know, when I originally wrote and sold that book, I had originally thought it was going to be sort of like a weird picture book, my 400-page novel, which is really like the most on-brand thing for me.
When I think Kelly Barnhill, I think 500-word stories. I think
yeah. No, I can't even spit in 500 words. But the thing is that my editor bought it being like, no, she's written a novel, she just doesn't realize it. And she's just like, okay, I bought this thing, now I want you to turn it into a novel. And I was like, fine, I don't know how anymore. I can't write novels anymore. I didn't start it actually until we were all together at Hamlin in 2020. And I was, sorry, don't tell our colleagues, ignoring people's lectures, because I was starting to write. I finally found it. I finally was like starting to go, and like people would be talking and I'd be like, okay, I think I found it. I think I found my way in. And then I was probably on the 6th or 7th chapter. It was my last meeting with my writers group, the Weirdsmiths. I'm the only children's author in my group, and it was 2 days before the state shut down, and we were talking about baking, and you know, we're so aware of everything that was about to change, and I was like, yeah, it's weird. I'm writing this story about baking, and there's just a lot of baking all the time. And we're just like, oh, wouldn't it be so funny if things shut down? Ha ha ha, because that's all we're going to do. We're all going to be baking. I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And then 2 days later. But what's weird is that, you know, I mean, a lot of things happened as I was sort of like working through this novel. We had a horrible murder in this city, and our streets erupted in this expression of rage and pain, but also connection too. Right. And, you know, we all showed up with our, you know, garbage bags and, you know, helped clean up, and we all showed up with food for the people whose grocery stores were disrupted and they didn't have access. And so I was thinking about what happens when an entire community loses its way and loses its mind. And how we come back together. And then the grown-up novel, of course, is dedicated to Christine Blasey Ford. So there's that too.
Kelly also wrote a Judge Kavanaugh book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I don't think Alana K. Arnold was here, but I think Red Hood was at least written partially after that. So it'll be interesting to see the Kavanaugh books coming out.
Really true.
Yeah.
That also was supposed to be a short story and very quickly turned into a novel. For a while, it was just called Rage Story, and now it's called When Women Were Dragons. It's about a bunch of 1950s housewives who turn into dragons and eat their husbands, because why wouldn't they? God. So
sounds like a Romanian folk song.
So anyway, we'll see how this all goes. I didn't think I was going to write again, and now here I am. You never do know.
You never do know, and I'm so glad you are.
I'm so glad you wrote this book, Anne. I just love it so much. I'm going to buy 4 more copies and give them to all of my nieces. I can't wait.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone so much for coming.
Thank you for coming, everybody. It's been really fun seeing your names in the chat.
Yeah.
I kept on wanting to mention it, but then I would have been interrupting Anne, and I interrupted her enough.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. On behalf of Wild Rumpus, thank you, Anne and Kelly, for this wonderful event. We've dropped links to buy The Troubled Girls of Dragon Academy in the chat. And if you order by this Thursday, October 28th, and we'll personalize them for you, just make note in your order, and we'll make sure that happens for you. There's also a 15% off code to grab from the chat as well. That'll take 15% off your order on our website. I had to do a quick wrap up. We do have another event coming up for In the Meadow of Fantasies with the illustrator Nushin Safako and the translator Sarah Khalili on Saturday, November 6th at 11 a.m. U.S. Central Time. Nushin is going to be zooming in from Iran, and Sarah from New York is one of the silver linings of doing virtual events. We hope to have all of you back in store, in person for events soon. Keep an eye on our social media for that. We are back open for in-store browsing. We are requiring masks for everyone over the age of 2, which means most of you in the chat. In fact, I would wager probably all of you in the chat. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. The one other last thing is I know everyone's going to be sick of hearing about the supply chain, and I hope eventually I never have to talk about it again, but it is a real problem. We are running into all sorts of issues here at the bookstore. But as you can see behind me, this is a very, very small percentage of the over 25,000 books that we have in stock here. And we are more than happy to help you find the perfect book for your loved ones for the holidays. So please be patient, booksellers. Please be patient with your postal workers. Buy a book you didn't know about before you walked into the bookstore. That's my advice for dealing with the supply chain issues. With that, thank you again, everyone, for being here. This has been a delight. Thank you, Kelly and Anne. Have a great evening, everyone.